push up the chest. Oh, my back. Shit. All right. Woo. All right, for anyone that doesn't follow us on Instagram at Canfield Corner, this is some of the stuff that we post in our story there that doesn't really make it to the video. So yesterday we half-lapped the yellow pine and got it on the wall. Before that, when the wall was still just studs, we framed out this opening. Now, the reason for this is we only have 8 linear foot of counter space, so every little square inch is at a premium. Now, what we did was we installed a floating shelf above, so now we have almost 14 inches from the shelf to the countertop of space down here. The microwave will slide in back here, and because I don't like cords that run everywhere, we rewired a receptacle recessed into the floating shelf. Man, that's a bunch of rurs. All right, so we got our wall done as far as all the 1x6 on it. Now, I did use yellow pine. All right, a lot of people hate using yellow pine. It's harder to work with in a lot of ways. A lot harder grain. You get a hard grain, soft grain, hard grain, soft grain. If you're using a hardwood, or say you're using like poplar or even white pine, you don't run into that as bad. But I like the look of yellow pine, and I really like the price of yellow pine, okay? Once it's on the wall, it's really not going to be as big of an issue as far as it warping or anything like that. We did adhere it to the wall with construction adhesive, as well as stapled it in, well, used 1 1/4 brads. But next thing we need to do is get this thing ready for finish. Now I could go through each one of the boards before I put them on the wall. I sanded them down with 80 grit, okay, to get rid of most of them. So they're pretty smooth. But with any lumber, you're going to have a slight thickness difference. Maybe this board cupped a little bit, this one may not have. So you get a little bit of an edge right here that's uneven. So you could go through, hook up a sander, and just sand this whole wall. You're going to create a lot of dust. So what I'm going to do is we're going to block plane just the gaps, okay? That'll even out the 2 boards for the most part. It may not take it all out, but once that's done, then we'll go through and sand it, and we'll create a lot less dust, a lot less mess. Now, before I can use the block plane, I need to double check each one of my brads. A couple places I had to actually put some finish nails because it was a little bit more warped in it. But before we can use our block plane, what we got to do, go through, make sure we set all of our nails down below the surface. If you're using a block plane, you hit a nail. Number 1, you're going to come to an abrupt stop. Number 2, you're most likely going to chip the blade on your plane, and you're more likely to tear out a big chunk. So let's get these nails set. There's really nothing hard about setting the nail. You just kind of run your hand across it, find one that's a little bit up, center your nail set on it, one light tap, and you're most likely good to go. Now, I did shoot these on, and a lot of people think that, you know, if you shot it on, air pressure is going to shoot it through there, but you got to remember that we're using yellow pine, and sometimes your brad will go in, hit a hard grain, and kick out or something, or to back off. If you have like a little bit of a knot, it won't sink as far. So that's all we're doing, is just double checking our work, basically. All right, but so now we got all of our nails set, and next thing we're going to do, run a block plane over all of our joints just to even them out a little better so we don't have to sand as much. And you come to this right here, got a little bit of a knot. It's going to be a lot harder for the block plane, but it's going to be a lot easier for the plane than it is for the sander to sit here and grind away on it all day. Just take small, shallow passes, and we'll get it out. So now that we have, what are you doing? You just gonna sit there while I do all the work? I guess so.
Was you just recording me?
All right, so with all the blocking done, next thing we need to do is go through and sand it. Obviously we live here. It's not a project that we're working on. So I've got my shop vac hooked up to my cheapo Depot Walmart orbital sander. I'll fire this thing up, try and keep the dust down. And I'm only going to sand, remember I sanded the boards with 80 grit before I brought them in to put them on. So I don't need to sand the whole board. All I'm dealing with is the edge where the two boards meet. All right, so we got it sanded, and remember I only sanded the joints. They're not perfect, and I don't want them perfect, okay? I could sit here and spend a whole lot of time making sure that this was perfectly smooth, but it's a wood wall, you know? It's somewhat supposed to look rough. I didn't go through and fix all of the little defects, every little chip in the wood. I didn't do that, you know? Because basically they're scars, you know, in the wood. And chicks dig scars. At least that's what I've been told. All right, so now we've got all of our joints sanded down. Didn't sand everything, didn't take out all the imperfections. There's still a little nick here in the edge of the board. There's a little chunk here by a knot. I'm not going to worry about that. Next thing we're going to do, take a little bit of acetone and wipe it down. Pine, especially yellow pine, has a lot of resins in it. And you know, tree sap, especially around the knots. We want to try and get as much of that taken care of as we can before we stain. Okay, so we got our walls wiped down with acetone, and one of the reasons people don't like to use pine, especially yellow pine, is when you stain it, it can be blotchy, okay? And by that I mean you'll have like a dark cloudy spot here or over here, and it'll be light in the middle. A lot of it has to do with, like I was saying, the resins that are in the wood itself. And then you have like hard grain, soft grain, hard grain, soft grain, and it just kind of does that. So one of the things you can do is use a pre-stain. Now, a lot of people don't like using Minwax. They say it's cheap, and it's not expensive, okay? And it may not be the greatest product on the market. I don't know. I haven't used every product on the market. I've used Minwax a lot. I like it. It's what I prefer. And remember, this is not, I stress not, a how-to channel. I'm not trying to teach you anything. I'm just merely documenting how I did it. I use Minwax pre-stain. All right, so the way this pre-stain works is it's almost like a water consistency, and basically you're just going to paint it on. Not a how-to, but I highly recommend you start at the top and work your way down. If you start at the bottom and come up, anything up here that happens to fall off, like some loose sawdust, is going to wind up in what you just did. All right, so pausing here real quick. on this side, you can tell where I have not put any of the pre-stain conditioner on it. This side over here I have. And what it's doing is it's soaking in and filling up some of the grain voids and everything so that your stain is soaked into the wood more evenly. That's what eliminates the blotchiness. You want to pay real close attention to a knot when you come to it. Make sure you get that soaked in there real good. Now what we'll do is we'll let this sit on the wall for, according to the can, 5 to 15 minutes. I found that 10 minutes works really well for me. Might have to do with the humidity, temperature, whatever. But generally speaking, every time I've done it, it's about 10 minutes is about the right amount of time. At that point, you want to go through, wipe it off, any of the excess that's on it. Then you want to wait, I don't remember the exact time, I think it's 30 minutes or so for it to fully kind of dry in before you stain. But you do have to have it stained, I believe it's 4 hours after you put this on, or you need to pre-stain again. All right, so we're gonna let this sit for just a couple minutes. Obviously, I started in this corner over here. It's probably about ready to wipe. I just finished in this other lower corner over here. It's nowhere near ready, but by the time I get through wiping this side, this corner over here should be ready. All right, so now we're ready to wipe this down. I just basically use old white t-shirts because I've got a lot of them. And you're not really scrubbing, you're just trying to wipe off anything that hasn't soaked into the wood yet. And yes, my son and his girlfriend just got here, so the dogs are going crazy. Sorry about that. You don't get a whole lot off of it. I don't know if you can tell or not. All right, so now our pre-stain is dried, or wood conditioner, whichever you want to call it. We're getting ready to actually put the stain on the wall. They'll tell you got to stir stain, don't mix it. I know that all the stuff settles out to the bottom, and that's most likely why, but I'm not a professor of stainology, so I don't know. I just do what the can says. So once again, I'm going to be using Minwax. We're using golden oak, just because we want it to have a little bit of color, but we don't want it to be dark in here. So the way I do it, you can use a foam brush. There's countless ways to apply stain. Me, once again, old white t-shirt. Now they say when you do it, you want to go with the grain. However, if you're going like this, you're still getting a stain on there. The problem is you get more here than you do here and all of that, which is why they say go with the grain, in case you ever wanted to know. And another tip, if you're using an orbital sander or electric sander or something like that, if you hold it in place for too long, when you stain, even if you're using a fine grit sandpaper, you will see your sanding marks when you stain it. And you notice every once in a while I'll go from where I'm staining back into the other. That's to kind of help wipe that in, especially if you're using yellow pine like this. It'll help even it out a little better too. The wall is fully stained and we just need to wait 4 hours before we can move on to the next step. Alright, so the first coat of Minwax polycrylic satin is on the wall. I need to wait 2 hours, lightly sand it with about 220 grit, apply a second coat, repeat, third coat, repeat, fourth coat, leave it alone. There's no need to film any of that. It's all the same process. So gonna call it a day here. Y'all give me a thumbs up if you made it this far. Remember to subscribe, hit that notification bell. Leave me a comment if there's anything else you want to know about. If maybe I did something that you didn't understand, maybe you didn't understand anything I did, just want to tell me what a goofball I am, go right ahead. Y'all have a good day.